I want to pay tribute to Brainkind Fen House in my constituency of Ely and East Cambridgeshire for their incredible work to support people with acquired brain injuries. They provide a safe and secure space for patients with rehabilitation and support so that people can thrive after brain injury. In preparing for this debate, Brainkind Fen House shared with me the story of my constituent Florence, and I want to share it today. Florence gave birth to twins, which should have been a very special time in her life, but unfortunately, just 2 weeks later, she suffered a stroke, resulting in a brain injury. Her ability to speak became severely impaired. She found it difficult to walk or use her hands. Just imagine, as a new mother, you suddenly find that your body won't let you care for your babies. Florence went to Brainkind Fen House, and after just 5 months of rehabilitation with their clinicians, she regained the use of her hands, so she can now change and bathe her babies. Her speech recovered, and she's able to walk again. I can't do her story justice on my own, so I want to quote her directly. I felt helpless. My whole world had crumbled, but Brainkind offered so much support. They made me realise I'm not alone. The staff rallied round, organising donations of toys and clothes for my children so we could spend time together. Then, as I began to recover, they took me shopping so I could buy things for my children for the first time. Florence's story is a special one, showing us the vital role these specialists play in ensuring acquired brain injuries are not the end, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I was also privileged to meet an individual at an event here this week, which was on a different subject, but she wanted to talk about acquired brain injuries because at the age of 16, her brother suffered an injury and was an almost completely different person afterwards, as we've heard from others. 2 things she said stood out. She said it was almost like he had gone through a factory reset, and she had to mourn the brother she once knew and bond with the brother she now had. They were 2 different people. She said his smile is different. Everyone she spoke to didn't notice any difference, but she knew. His face muscles moved differently, meaning she, as someone who knew him all his life, could spot this when others could not. This story just goes to show the pain these injuries can cause to the person's loved ones. In this case, it caused a sense of grief. Her brother had not passed away, but the brother she knew was gone, and she now had someone else to bond with. Brainkind Fen House gives strong support to brain-damaged people and a range of therapies to help them recover. But there are strict criteria for the continued NHS funding after the first few months, which means that small improvements in the person are not always sufficient to get funding for continued rehabilitation. Then the person is moved into long-term care with little, if any, further support. I have another case where the person was responding to rehab, but the funding was coming to an end. After significant advocacy from their parents and the staff at Fen House, the funding was extended. That person is now waiting for a suitable flat, and their parents are fighting for a care package to support him in independent living. People shouldn't have to fight for this support, and it shouldn't need an MP's intervention. We need a clearer, fairer process to ensure people get the rehab support which they need, and then the housing and care support they need as they move back into the community. I ask the government to publish the Acquired Brain Injuries Action Plan as soon as possible, and for it to include the right for those who've suffered to have access to a named GP. This must come hand in hand with better social care for disabled people and free personal care. The stories I've shared highlight that more needs to be done, not only to help, but to understand the impact on their friends and family. And I hope that this debate highlights the need for urgent action so we can do more to help patients and their loved ones.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And may I also thank the Honourable Member for South Holland and the Deepings for securing this debate and for the work that he's doing as chair of the cross-party group on acquired brain injury. I'd worked with his predecessor, the Honourable Member for the Rhondda, on these issues. Dame Siobhan, I want to speak about the case of Imran Douglas, the deceased son of my constituent Amy, to illustrate why an acquired brain injury strategy and action plan should no longer be a matter of if, but when. Imran was born in 1995 and suffered brain injury as a result of a road accident when he was just 17. He was in a coma, and when he woke up, he was found to have had significant personality changes. Imran was taken into care, having never had any prior need for psychiatric assessments or having ever had any run-ins with any authorities or the criminal justice system. Whilst in care, Imran committed an horrific act of murder, something which his mother, my constituent, has always maintained was a brutal and undeserved attack for which Imran was responsible, of an elderly person who was completely innocent. Imran was then transferred to hospital, and in 2013, Imran pled guilty to murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Imran was the first 18-year-old to ever be sent to Belmarsh prison following his sentence. He lasted less than a week because he killed himself. A subsequent inquest into Imran's death found a lack of planning and a failure of care by some of those responsible for his welfare whilst he was in custody, who were aware of Imran's condition. It spoke to a systemic lack of communication between and within almost all of the agencies involved, most notably within Feltham Young Offenders Institution. In other words, he shouldn't have been transferred to Belmarsh prison. And since his suicide, Imran's mother, Amy, and his father, Masoom, had been fighting for a serious case review. They've been fighting for several years and they've never been granted one. His parents, over the years, have also been working with the Brain Injury Forum, with various other campaign groups as well for changes in the law to identify brain injury at much earlier stages and to ensure that people in this country have the right support in this regard. And I pay tribute to them and their efforts over the years to deal with the pain of that loss and the tragic circumstances around it, and to use their energy and their time to campaign for changes to be brought. They know, like me, that any action plan must be wide-ranging, must be comprehensive, and must be multifaceted, because the prevalence of acquired brain injury among those with contact with the criminal justice system are reported to be around the 46 to 60% mark overall, and between 50% to 87% among children, and 78% among women. Indeed, I've supported the work of Brainkind, an organisation who have evidenced the impact of brain injury on domestic abuse survivors. For example, their report, Too Many to Count, found that actually 1 in 2 survivors of domestic abuse may have sustained a brain injury, often through blows to the head or through non-fatal strangulation. And as chair of the cross-party group on domestic violence and abuse, we are well aware among our membership of the correlation between women in prison and undiagnosed conditions such as acquired brain injury. What's important for a revised or a shorter action plan is to make sure that departments and services speak to one another and that is worked in to the action plan itself, making sure there's duties placed upon national bodies, government services, social services to share, to collect data and to analyse it, but to also share it with each other. Because ultimately, if we look at the case of Imran, even just data collection and sharing it between services perhaps could have meant that his death could have been prevented. I think it's also very, very important to make sure that that action plan invests in awareness, training and support. Brainkind are actually doing some work around this, and they've actually developed a new free tool, which is not a diagnostic tool, but it is a tool that professionals can use to support themselves when working with survivors of acquired brain injury. And these are the areas that we need to be looking at if we really want to be able to actually deliver an action plan, as well as present one that can be passed through as soon as possible. And I say this because my constituent Amy has shown incredible